Catherine Saul. My gender pronouns are she, her, they, them, and I protest because I want to end systemic and historical oppression.
My name is Ruth. It's our she, her, and I protest because as an Asian American woman, my identity has been politicized my whole life, and I'd like to change it so that no minority group is ever marginalized.
Hi, my name is Blaine. I use they, them pronouns, and I protest for the people that I love.
I'm Mike Paradella. I have he, him pronouns, and I protest because I love myself and I love other people.
Demonic, my pronouns are he, him, his. I protest because I love and I want to fight for my people.
My name is Hui Tran. I use he, him pronouns, and I protest because that is sometimes the most effective way to do the right thing.
This is the scene you've been seeing all your life. The one inside a dream, you repeat it every night. For 24 frames every second through the light, projected through the screen.
I've actually been an activist for about 5 years.
I've been an activist for about 2 years now. Was it 2 years?
I've been an activist since I was in high school, so I've been an activist for 18 years.
I've been an activist for about 9 to 10 years now.
Wow! Oh no! Sorry. Okay, take two.
I've been an activist for about 9 to 10 years, ever since I was in high school. And so in college, I was doing a lot of work around the trafficking of Filipino migrant workers, and I was with an organization called Anak Bayan Silicon Valley, and so we worked a lot on Filipino migrants who were not only trafficked to the United States, but also trafficked to Hong Kong, to Canada, Japan, and Indonesia. Now I do more local work here in San Jose, California, my hometown. I still focus on migrant rights and workers' rights, but I also am a part of a group called Serve the People San Jose, which is leading a campaign to stop Google from building a campus here in San Jose and to ultimately have San Jose residents take control over public land.
I actually started out here at De Anza. I first joined Students for Justice and transitioned De Anza. And I was also a part of the De Anza Sustainability Alliance during the 2 years that I was here. And after that, I actually joined Anak Bayan Silicon Valley and the National Democratic Movement in the Philippines. But since then, I've kind of I've transitioned out of activism.
My introduction into protesting was actually really self-driven. My friends and I in high school just thought we needed to do something to make some kind of change. I picked that up in college when we started planning mass actions to protest the budget cuts to the CSU system and protests against the war in Iraq. Continued that when I became a union organizer for Unite Here and worked on different campaigns after I graduated from college. Now, I do stay involved through community activism with organizations like the Vietnamese American Roundtable, with the Wage Theft Coalition, and with folks who fight on issues for worker justice.
I really started becoming an activist sometime after my first year of college, when I started becoming more involved with the community, and especially becoming involved with a particular organization, Anak Bayan Silicon Valley. Anak Bayan Silicon Valley, we are a grassroots youth and students organization based here in the South Bay. And what we want to do is liberate the people in the Philippines and we're a grassroots youth and students Filipino org, pushing to liberate the people in the Philippines and provide the people with a national democratic government, which is a government that is for the people.
I think a turning point was definitely the election of Donald Trump in November 6th. Like, I was tracking that election the whole night, and I was so shocked that he was actually elected, and also hurt, and I think a lot of people were, and I just felt like we couldn't just sit around and do nothing. So then that's why in 3 months after, there was a women's march in San Jose, and then me and my friends attended that, and it was amazing.
Yes, yeah, it does. All of it, yes. It means being a queer woman of color, a queer Filipina, to someone who has issues and hardships with depression and anxiety, but it's also a way for me to address my own privileges as someone who has a college degree, as someone who has the privilege of having family and friend supports that are around me, the privilege of having a roof over my head. So for me, class, gender, ability, sexuality, all of that plays into not only my activism, but how do I live my life as someone in this very capitalist and colonized world.
For example, since I'm of the working class, I want higher minimum wages so that way people can like afford living. And also because I'm a man, I recognize that I take up a lot of space, and I need to also challenge other men to like not take up as much space and to stop being as toxic and to be more inclusive. And since I'm Asian, like recognizing how my Asianness has been weaponized against other people of color, like particularly Black and brown people, and recognizing that like how I can help support those people while also challenging the white supremacy power structures that are at play. Ethnically, I'm half white and half Filipino, and this like mixture of identities is one of the reasons why I joined an ACPAI to kind of like explore my Filipino side, which has been denied to me for about 27 years or so.
My activism came about because of first class and my race. Right, my parents and my family are refugees from Vietnam, so they came over and they had to work very hard for everything that they got. But even when they did, they faced racism, they faced stereotypes, and things weren't easy. Then, as we get into college, though, it played more into my activism because growing up in San Pablo, there weren't a lot of Vietnamese people. Coming to San Jose was like going back to Vietnam, seeing all these Vietnamese people all over the place. Amazing opportunity for me to learn more about my history, my people, and that motivated me to fight more. Because when you connect with your past, when you connect with the struggles of the people who came before you, you see why you have to keep fighting, and you see why these struggles impact the decisions that you get to make today and the opportunities that you get to have today.
Oftentimes we think of Asians and Asian Americans as submissive, as docile, but seeing the Filipino community being really fierce and militant and agitated was really inspiring for me. So that's how I got involved with protesting and campaigns and activism. And the reason I keep on staying involved is through relationships that I have with my community members and the people who are most marginalized.
Mike was with me during my first protest in downtown San Jose, and it was for stopping the separation of families at the border, basically protesting all of the things that ICE is doing right now.
It is a movement, a national democratic movement for the liberation of the Philippines. And I just want to talk about how child separation is nothing new for the history of the American empire.
What were some tips of advice that you gave to me that you should give to people who are going to their first protests? Because I know I was kind of scared initially.
One thing I would say is, contrary to what the mainstream media says, protests are generally pretty safe. But things you want to do is that you want to always check in with your protest buddies, because things can get pretty hectic, especially if it's the first time protesting. They're not going to know what's going on. Asking them what's going on, how they're feeling, kind of grounds them back to what's happening, and it makes them feel like there's someone who actually has their back.
Since the days of colonization, with the creation of border schools for Native Americans, to the separation of African slaves with their families to break it up to placate rebellion, we see the same tactics in the Philippines with the stealing of natural resources and Filipino families not having enough to live on. So what ends up happening is 6,000 Filipinos end up leaving the Philippines every day, 80% of them women.
Definitely. I had my phone charged really high, and we made sure to meet at the same spot, and sometimes the protests take a certain walking route, so just knowing where your buddy is at all times.
Yeah.
And I also remember that during the protest you would call me Kasama instead of using my name.
By calling you Kasama instead of your government name, it's a way of protecting you from the state. Because if something were to happen and someone heard Angel, they'd be like, oh, Angel was there, and then that could connect you to other people.
This is not a problem of the Democrats or the Republicans. This is a problem of the American empire and the way it functions, and requires the exploitation of Filipino people, of Mexican people, of all peoples across the world to function. And when the institutions abandon us, we need to recognize this injustice and forsake the institutions that have put everyone around the planet in slave-like conditions.
Another tip that I picked up was to understand your own privilege. As a citizen of the US, if I were part of an illegal action, I wouldn't be at risk of being deported the way another Kasama would be if they didn't have documentation.
The action we were doing, we were basically occupying, just disrupting inside of a building, and it was mostly white people who were doing it because they recognized that the United States government isn't going to be as hard on white people as they would if a black person were doing it. Also, just remember that if one person's not feeling it, just back out. Your need to be at a protest is not more important than your friend's safety.
We need to organize together, learn to love each other and protect each other, because only we can liberate ourselves from this hypocrisy, from this empire.
Our main vision is to kind of address the idea that Asian Americans have been associated with this image of obedience, submissiveness, and being docile. We've been known to prefer, to quietly achieve success rather than standing against authority and for what we believe in and calling out what's wrong. Do you feel that this is important to disprove the stereotype, to erase this image that's been perpetuated by society? And do you think it's important to stand up and expose the world to this new generation of active Asian Americans?
The fact that like Asians are all lumped together, there's already like differences in power and like how people perceive us, that like folks who are quote unquote falling within like this model minority are suffering under it.
So I do want to touch upon that there is a model minority myth where it seems like Asians are okay and they're living their best life and are very wealthy and have these really high paying jobs. But it often masks that there are many undocumented and Asian migrant communities here in the US who are struggling every day and living below the poverty line. And because of these different myths and stereotypes that we have, it doesn't really address the reality of poverty and the very real realities of US influence over other Asian countries that still happen today. For me, I think it is really important to address these different stereotypes and myths because they're dangerous. They put people's lives on the lines, quite literally, not only here in the United States, where undocumented Asians actually are, I think, one of the highest numbers and populations that are growing, but it also impacts people who are outside of the United States, where US militarization is killing families and communities every day. So it's really important to address these myths and overcome them and instead substitute them with realities that there are Asian folks and Asian communities who are resisting and rising and organizing themselves to affirm their humanity.
I think there's this myth that Asian American activism is kind of new because a lot of times we're told that our struggles, the oppression that we face, the obstacles that we have to surmount, a lot of times they're deemed insignificant because they're not, as noticeable or as, they say, oh, you don't have it as bad as, the Latinos or the African Americans. But I want to address that Asian American activism is giving a voice to those young Asian Americans who want to address that every struggle that we face is a struggle that all of us collectively as a community can still come together and accept that, and we'll face this together.
Protest is a form of organizing, right? It's about manifesting what people are angry about and stepping up and creating disruption to draw attention to it. Not disruption for disruption's sake. It's disruption because people have to understand why you're angry, why we're angry. So protest is done, you block the freeways, you block traffic, and it's because now people who might not otherwise pay attention are like, well, why are you guys blocking the freeway? It's expression. Right? When people are angry and frustrated because people in power don't listen to them, they go out and they create disruption in part because you have to get your frustration out somehow. Right? It's getting out there, getting people together, and causing other people to stop for a minute and listen.
What up?
Los servicios de internet de Amazon. Los empleados de Amazon están demandando que la compañía corte su relación con ICE. Este
protest because, as corny as it may sound, I think it's a form of love in action. I think that when communities organize together and they create campaigns together and they're able to empower themselves through a protest or confront someone who is oppressing them, I think it's history in the making. I think it's a way for people to affirm their own humanity. And it's a way to show the world as well, who are not at that protest, but maybe are watching from Berlin or watching from South Africa or other parts of the country in the world, to see that people are resisting and saying that they're not going to take the oppression that they're facing. So that's why I protest, is that I think it's love in action and an affirmation of communities who have been historically and systemically marginalized.
Few hours wherever they protest, and it passed the message around about what they do, and ask the community not to support the business.
My name is Angel Trazo. She, her, hers, and I protest because I love spreading awareness and letting people know that things are happening in society, like beyond the surface, that are detrimental, and that they can use their voices to stand up against it.
My name is Kelly Hong. My pronoun is she, her. I'm protesting because I believe the family should be together and this is wrong.
I am Chelsea Wong. I go by she, her. Why I protest today was there's a lot of questions that have been thrown our way, and they're confused in why we're protesting Amazon, because no one knows about Amazon is one of the main reasons why families are being separated when they go through the border, and especially for Amazon when it's a part of so many people's lives. It's important for them to be aware that something that they use in their everyday life is actually directly affecting other people's daily lives.
My name is Ulysses too. I am pronounced as he or him. And the reason why I protest is because I would like to fight for the best, for justice, especially among children, because I have been bullied in elementary school and at the beginning of middle school, and then I started to fit in high school, and now I'm planning to start an anti-bullying campaign.
People think that the protest is the end goal, but really it's just a tactic for something much larger. And so for protests, really there are 2 to 3 goals. The first one is to empower the people who are most oppressed or feeling oppression. The second is to share their demands to someone who's oppressing them, whether it means workers' rights demands or other demands. And the third thing is to gather media attention and public support for your cause. And so those are the 3 things that you want to achieve. But as I mentioned before, a protest isn't really the end goal. And so along with the protests, the larger goal has to be kept in mind, whether it means finally achieving workers' rights or finally achieving that a certain group of workers can have livable wages at the very end of it.
See, and there's the police over there.
We will continue to fight. We will continue to protest. We will continue to boycott. Gente unida jamás será vencida.
My activism started not because of a social justice issue, but because I saw something I didn't like in my high school. It got me to think about how decisions are made, how power works, and how it can be changed or how it can be moved so that the people impacted by the decisions are the one who make those decisions. So really what it comes down to is if you see something wrong, do something about it. You have to be able to step out of your comfort zone to really see what your limits are, to see what you're willing to do to stand up for your moral values. Very hard thing to do, but when you're young, that's the time to do it.
I would say don't settle for what's happening right now. The system that we're in right now, it's not broken. This is how it's supposed to function. There are better ways of organizing ourselves and organizing our society, and it's only when we band together and actually see other communities, not just our own, that we can create the change we want. The Philippines will never be free if Palestine is not free. The Asian community will not be free if the Black community is still suffering from police brutality. As Asada Shakur has said, any community that seriously considers its own freedom must consider the freedom of other people.
So to all you young Asian Americans out there, firstly I want to tell you is embrace your culture, embrace the people around you, embrace your community. In these times of struggles, in these times of oppression, we might feel alone, we might feel individual and just by ourselves going through our own issues, but in reality, you're with a community. And in that idea of unity and embracing your community, like, integrate with your community, learn about what the people around you are going through. Don't be disconnected, reach out to other people. Not just like learn about their issues, but also reach out and just make those bonds and connections. By having those bonds and connections, that's how we can, as one, work together to better our lives, better the system, and really fight for a revolution. And don't forget, there's joy in the revolution.